in the heart of the Colorado desert, far from the noise of cities or the chaos of ordinary prisons, stands a fortress built for one purpose: to make escape impossible. The United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, known to the world as ADX Florence, is the most secure prison ever constructed on American soil. Its creation was not born out of ambition but necessity, the result of blood, rebellion, and the failure of older prisons to contain the worst of humanity. The story begins in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when America's federal prison system was at a breaking point. High-profile inmates were murdering guards, orchestrating riots, and running criminal empires from behind bars. At Marion Federal Penitentiary in Illinois, then considered the highest security facility, 2 correctional officers were brutally murdered on the same day in 1983 by members of the Aryan Brotherhood. The killing sent shockwaves through the Bureau of Prisons. The message was clear: the system could no longer contain its most dangerous men. The government needed a place so secure, so isolated, that even the thought of escape would die in a prisoner's mind. By 1994, construction was complete in a barren patch of land near the small town of Florence, Colorado. Surrounded by high desert plains and snow-capped mountains, ADX was born, a facility so fortified that it earned the nickname the Alcatraz of the Rockies. From the sky, it looked like a series of concrete crosses, each arm representing a housing unit radiating from a central command hub. Every inch of the 37-acre complex was designed to eliminate risk. Concrete barriers, laser sensors, attack dogs, and motion-detecting cameras tracked every move. Inside, cells were carved from solid concrete, measuring just 7 by 12 feet. Each had a bed, a stool, a desk, and a toilets in combination, all made of steel or stone. The window was a thin vertical slit, angled upwards so prisoners could see nothing but the sky. Even the air vents were designed to prevent communication. There were no bars, no open doors, only layers of concrete and automated steel. Prisoners would spend 23 hours a day in total isolation, allowed out for a single hour in a small, enclosed recreation pen the size of a dog kennel. Guards watched every movement through remote control cameras and intercoms. From the start, ADX Florence was meant to house the men who could not exist anywhere else. The terrorists, spies, cartel leaders, and serial killers would turn violence into a craft. The Bureau of Prisons called it a clean version of hell. Even the staff who worked there felt its psychological weight. As one former warden admitted, it's not designed for humanity, it's designed for control. By the time the first inmates arrived in 1994, the world had already begun whispering about the new Supermax. One by one, they came: the Unabomber Tedkaczynski, who killed 3 people with homemade bombs; Ramzi Yousef, who masterminded the 1993 World Trade Center bombing; Richard Reed, the infamous shoe bomber; and Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker of 9/11. Later, ADX will hold Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber, and elchapo Guzmán, the drug lord whose power once stretched across continents. Each man was stripped of everything that once gave him identity. The isolation was total. Communication was a privilege rarely granted. Letters were screened, calls were monitored, and visits took place through thick glass, if they happened at all. The only constant companion was silence. For most prisoners, the only voices they heard were commands through intercoms. Turn around, hands behind your back, step forward. Even among correctional officers, there was a grim understanding that this was not just a prison. It was a psychological experiment in obedience. Inmates who caused trouble in other federal prisons were sent here for behavioral modification. The message was simple: at ADX, there is no fight to win, no escape to plan, no human contact to manipulate. Only time, concrete, and silence. Over the years, stories began to leak from the inside. Whispers of men losing their sanity after years of sensory deprivation, of inmates talking to themselves or screaming into the void for hours. Former prisoners described hallucinations, sleeplessness, and paranoia. Lawsuits later alleged that the Bureau of Prisons ignored mental health issues, leaving many to deteriorate in solitude. Yet for the government, ADX was doing exactly what was built to do: prevent violence and stop communication between dangerous individuals and the outside world. But not everyone agreed that such isolation was justice. Human rights groups began calling ADX Florence a modern form of torture. Reports emerged of inmates cutting themselves or attempting suicide to escape the endless silence. One former inmate described it simply: "You're buried alive in concrete." Still, officials defended it fiercely. "These are the most dangerous people on earth," said one warden. "They earned their way here." And for the townspeople of Florence, the prison became both a source of pride and fear, a quiet reminder that some of the world's most infamous criminals were locked just a few miles away. By the dawn of the 2000s, ADX had become a symbol of absolute security, yes, but also of America's willingness to isolate rather than rehabilitate. Journalists called it a living tomb. Psychologists called it an experiment in sensory deprivation. And the prisoners called it the end of the world. The story of ADX Florence was far from over. Behind those walls, the men who once commanded armies, built bombs, and led cartels would face their greatest enemy, the silence itself. Because inside ADX, time doesn't pass. It lingers. And once you enter, you never truly leave. The sun rises quietly over the Colorado desert, spilling its first light across a field of razor wire and motion sensors. Inside ADX Florence, that sunrise means little. The men locked behind its walls cannot see it. Not really. Their only view of the outside world is a thin vertical slit in concrete, 4 inches wide, 2 feet tall, angled upward, so that even if they press their faces to glass, all they see is the endless blue sky. In this place, even the horizon has been taken away. The day begins at 5 a.m. when fluorescent lights flicker on in every cell simultaneously. There is no sound of human footsteps, no clanging of bars, only the faint hum of air vents and the metallic click of remote-controlled doors. Each inmate is alone. Breakfast is delivered through a narrow steel slot known as the cuff port. Hands must be inserted through it, palms out, wrists crossed, before food is passed in. The routine is mechanical, rehearsed, and unchanging. It's been said that the silence of ADX is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat echo off the walls. Meals are simple: lukewarm eggs, instant oatmeal, a carton of milk. Prisoners eat sitting on their concrete stools, staring at gray walls etched with years of marks and scratches. There are no cafeterias, no shared spaces. Every act, eating, showering, exercising, takes place in isolation. Some men read to pass the time. Others pace in slow circles until the soles of their shoes were thin. For many, days blur into months and months into years. At 9 a.m., it's time for the recreation hour. But here, recreation doesn't mean freedom. The door to the cell opens by remote control, and the inmate is ordered to back out, cuffed, shackled, and escorted by 2 guards. He is then taken down a narrow hallway into a small outdoor cage, a concrete pen with tall walls and a metal grate overhead. There is no grass, no view, no touch of another human being. Some prisoners call it the dog run. It's the only hour of the day they see sunlight, though even that is filtered through wire mesh. To ensure absolute control, every move is recorded. Cameras line every corridor. Motion detectors track every step. Prisoners are counted multiple times a day, even though escape is virtually impossible. Each door requires multiple electronic keys, and guards work in teams of 3 at minimum. If one officer makes a mistake, the others are trained to correct it instantly. Red zones mark areas where prisoners can never be left unsupervised. Even in the visiting room, there is no physical contact. Conversations happen through glass and monitor phones, limited to 1 hour a month for some inmates. For men like Tedkaczynski, Ramzi Yousef, and Richard Reed, this is daily life. But for some, like Chapo Guzmán, the conditions are even more extreme. After his dramatic escape from a Mexican prison through a mile-long tunnel, U.S. officials took no chances. His cell at ADX is reinforced with extra surveillance, and he is not allowed near any other inmate. His recreation area is separate, and his movements are logged down to the second. He'll never see daylight as a free man again. One guard once said, "We built this place for men like him." The psychological effects of this environment are profound. Psychiatric experts have called ADX Florence a laboratory of human isolation. Inmates often develop insomnia, paranoia, and hallucinations. Some claim they hear voices whispering through the vents. Others stop speaking entirely. One prisoner described his existence in a letter. "It's like living in your own coffin. The only thing that changes is the date." Guards say they sometimes hear screams echo through the corridors late at night. Long, drawn-out wails that start suddenly and fade into silence. But inside ADX, screaming accomplishes nothing. No one comes. Even the guards, protected by procedure, feel the psychological toll. They work 8-hour shifts in silence, watching monitors and performing routines that rarely change. Some have compared it to guarding ghosts. Former warden Robert Hood later admitted that the environment changes everyone who enters. It's a clean version of hell. There's no blood, no chaos, but the suffering is real. You can feel it in the air. Yet despite its reputation, life inside ADX isn't always permanent. The Bureau of Prisons uses a step-down program allowing certain inmates to earn their way out. If they follow rules for years without incident, they can eventually transfer to a less restrictive facility, though few ever make it that far. The process takes years of perfect compliance. For the majority, especially terrorists or high-profile murderers, the sentence is lifelong isolation. They will die within these walls. To manage their sanity, prisoners develop rituals. Some write letters to themselves. Others count tiles or recite entire books from memory. Tedkaczynski spent years writing essays and exchanging letters with academics. Ramzi Yousef memorized passages from the Quran and exercised obsessively. Yet for many, the mind eventually fractures. In 2005, a lawsuit was filed by several inmates claiming the prison ignored severe mental illness. One prisoner had cut off his earlobe. Another had swallowed a razor blade. Still, the policy remained unchanged. Security first, humanity second. From the outside, ADX Florence appears silent, efficient, and calm. But beneath that order lies a system designed to erase human connection. Prison reform advocates describe it as a place where time stops existing. The walls don't just confine, they consume. Inmates who were once powerful leaders, feared killers, or global threats are reduced to silence, their legacies fading behind unmarked doors. The isolation is so absolute that even the desert around ADX seems to mirror it. Endless, empty, indifferent. The only sounds are the wind scraping against the fences and the distant hum of generators. For the few who have seen inside, the image never leaves. Rows of identical concrete cells, narrow corridors lit by cold white light, and men who have not felt another human hand in decades. Inside these walls, punishment isn't physical, it's psychological. The body remains alive, but the mind is buried. Every second echoes with the same question: how long can a person live without hearing another voice? For most inmates, the answer comes quietly, over years of silence, when memory itself begins to fade. And that's when the true purpose of ADX Florence reveals itself. It isn't just a prison. It's a place designed to make the world forget you exist. By the time night falls over the Colorado desert, the temperature drops sharply. The sand turns cold, and the wind howls through the razor wire fences of ADX Florence. Inside, the lights never truly go out. Fluorescent bulbs glow through the night, keeping every corridor under constant watch. Sleep comes in fragments. 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, broken by the metallic clank of doors and the echo of guards' boots on polished concrete. For the inmates, time no longer flows. It drips slowly, endlessly, like water in a dark cave. For decades, ADX Florence has been called a clean version of hell. It was built to contain violence, and it succeeded. There have been no successful escapes, no riots, no hostage situations. But the silence that keeps the peace has its own price. Over the years, it consumed minds, broken spirits, and in many cases, claimed lives. Between 2000 and 2019, at least 7 inmates took their own lives inside ADX, though some reports suggest the real number is higher. One of them was Thomas Silverstein, once the most feared inmate in America, a man who had spent 36 years in solitary confinement for killing a correctional officer at Marion Penitentiary. Silverstein lived in a specially constructed cell within ADX known as Range 13, a corridor built to keep him separate from every other human being. When he died in 2019, he had not touched another person in over 3 decades. His story became a haunting symbol of what isolation can do to the human mind. Another tragedy unfolded in 2008 when Jose Martin Vega, serving a life sentence, was found hanging in a cell. Guards discovered that he had used his bedsheet to take his own life. Reports later revealed that Vega had repeatedly requested mental health help but received none. Former warden Robert Hood once admitted, "You could be in a cell alone for years, hearing nothing but your own thoughts. Eventually, the human brain starts to turn on itself. For those who remain alive inside, the years grind them down. Some develop rituals to stay sane, talking to insects, folding and unfolding sheets of paper, or replaying memories to remind themselves they still exist. Others lose the battle quietly, retreating into silence until they no longer respond to voices at all." Psychologists who have studied long-term solitary confinement describe it as a slow psychological death. Yet even in a place built for total control, small cracks sometimes appear. In 2012, an inmate named Eric Rudolph, the Olympic Park bomber, wrote a series of letters describing life inside ADX. He called it a place of sensory starvation, where men walked in circles in tiny pens, watched by cameras from every angle. His letters confirmed what human rights advocates had long suspected, that ADX Florence wasn't just punishing crimes, it was dismantling identities. In 2015, a group of inmates filed a class-action lawsuit against the Bureau of Prisons, alleging that the facility's extreme isolation violated the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The plaintiffs described hallucinations, self-harm, and a denial of mental health care. One prisoner claimed he saw faces in the concrete walls. Another said he hadn't spoken to another person in so long that he had forgotten how to start a conversation. The case ended in a settlement that promised improved mental health treatment. But advocates say little has changed. Even for the guards, the emotional toll is immense. Some retire early, haunted by what they witnessed. "You watch a man slowly disappear," said one former officer. "Not physically, but mentally. Day after day, you see the light fade from their eyes." Another described leaving work each night and driving to the desert in silence, needing miles of empty road to shake off the weight of what he'd seen. Outside the prison walls, life in the small town of Florence moves quietly. Locals shop, children go to school, and the town clock ticks in the center of Main Street. But the presence of ADX looms constantly, a fortress of concrete less than 10 miles away, housing some of the world's most infamous men. Some residents say it gives them a sense of security. Others say they can feel the darkness of it, like a shadow that never moves. "We live next to a cage for monsters," one shop owner once said, "but we forget those monsters are still human." Over the years, journalists, filmmakers, and human rights investigators have requested access to film inside ADX Florence. Almost all have been denied. The Bureau of Prisons rarely allows cameras inside, citing national security. What little the public has seen comes from leaked photos, rare interviews, or released inmates describing life in the box. To this day, the details of its daily operations remain among the most closely guarded secrets in the American prison system. Perhaps the most chilling truth about ADX Florence is that escape is not only impossible, it's unnecessary. The prison doesn't need to kill its inmates. The isolation itself does the work. For those who once commanded armies, plotted terror, or ran empires of crime, this is their final sentence, a life where no one hears their voice again. Time becomes meaningless, memory fades, and the outside world forgets. The punishment is not death, it's invisibility. Yet, hidden beneath the steel and concrete, there's an unspoken question that lingers, one that neither guards nor inmates can escape. At what point does justice become cruelty? Is it possible to take away every human contact, every sound, every sight, and still call it humane? When Tedkaczynski, the Unabomber, died by suicide in 2023 after spending more than 2 decades at ADX, the question resurfaced. For years, he had described the isolation as a death before death. His passing reignited debate over whether such confinement truly serves justice. or merely satisfies vengeance. Today, ADX Florence remains fully operational, housing around 350 inmates, including terrorists, spies, and killers whose names once dominated headlines. From the outside, it appears calm, unshakable, perfectly controlled. But inside, unseen and unheard, hundreds of minds continue to unravel in the quiet hum of fluorescent light. The fortress stands as both a marvel of security and a monument to human loneliness. Every brick, every door, every shadow whispers the same truth. In ADX Florence, the body may survive, but the soul does not. And as the wind sweeps across the empty Colorado desert each night, the sound it carries isn't freedom. It's the echo of forgotten men,